Hello, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me okay. We're still waiting on a few more attendees to join up based upon the amount of interest we received recently. We actually pushed back this webinar, and there was actually several other outages in the last few weeks as well, which has actually increased more demand for this. So I do apologize for the one rescheduling. The first time we had this webinar scheduled, it was actually during ITW. So it was a pretty popular event that a lot of attendees asked to have this pushed back. So we're going to be starting this in a minute. Okay, everybody. Once again, welcome to Constellar DNS Made Easy. This, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, this was an original webinar we had scheduled a couple of weeks ago based upon some recent interest in the industry based upon the number of cloud outages that have been happening. Unfortunately, when it was scheduled, we scheduled it during ITW, which is a pretty large networking event, and many of our participants that use some of our multi-cloud solutions asked us to reschedule it. And then during that time, of course, as many are aware, we had many other cloud outages happen. So it's actually a good timing to have a discussion like this, and it's a good idea to bring this up and raise this awareness in the industry and to show many of you online that are not aware of possible solutions. So today we're going to be talking about how to beat the cloud provider outages with the DNS solution. And once again, my name is Stephen Job. I'm the president and founder of Constellar and DNS Made Easy, and I'm excited to actually show you some of these solutions here today. So all along during this solution or during this webinar, as usual, please ask any questions you want in the chat. I do have several polls to ask today because I'm actually curious based upon the attendees we have at this webinar, what some of the current solutions are out there. So I've been in the industry for going on close to 20 years now. We started DNS Made Easy 17 years ago, just as a simple solution to offer enterprise DNS, a fast DNS solution. Over the past, obviously 17 years, it's been the highest uptime, the fastest performing. And then we've added additional services along the way. DNS Failover is a big one. GeoDNS with the global traffic director is another one. And then we, of course, added a lot of other needs for additional services. And that's why we developed our Constellar product, which is why a lot of users have moved over to us today for that. So what we're going to do today is talk about ways to figure out how these global CDN and global cloud providers are having outages. But what I always usually do before we do any webinars, I look through the attendees and I try to get some understanding of who our clients are. And this one's pretty diverse. I see many clients I have registered today are using our DNS Made Easy product. And I see many that are using our Constellar product. I see many that don't have any CDNs configured. I got many that are using one CDN. And I also see a lot of registrants that actually aren't using us as a DNS vendor. So it's actually a good mixed audience today. So feel free to ask any questions you want. I'll be more than happy to answer them. So I do have one quick poll I want to start off with. And I want to know what currently are there any services, and are you doing any cloud services or using other than your DNS hosting? And I just want to use that to base some of the ideas that I want to present today in the webinar. Obviously, a lot of the webinar we have is made up screens, but I can diverse it and change it up based upon some of the responses that I see. So let's give this another quick second over here. Make sure everyone responds. All right, so let's close this off and let's look at the results here. So it looks that 70% are using other cloud services. So that's pretty interesting. That's a good fact to know. 30% are not. So we're saying it's 30%, or maybe are using outsourced DNS or a cloud-hosted DNS solution, but they haven't moved anything to the cloud yet. And there may be reasons why they haven't gone to the cloud, and maybe some of those reasons we can fix and talk about today will actually move some of those to the cloud. And I'll be honest, maybe some of the reasons we talk about is going to move people from the cloud in. I know throughout our 17 years, we've had a good amount of people move to the cloud and move back. A lot of people think they're going to save money going to the cloud, realizing they're spending 10 to 20 times more. And so they move back in-house, and it's a constant dilemma of how to get the cloud performance without scaling out this huge infrastructure around the world, but at the same time, not blow out your IT budgets with the move. So what we're going to talk about today is that with the global CDN outages and the cloud outages out there is why you should care, right? And what we can do about it. We're going to do a little bit of a demo, as usually I do with most of the webinars. We're going to talk about what people are seeing and what we can do and how we can fix things, and then we'll do the Q&A session. So feel free to line up your questions, get them ready as we go through the webinar today. I'd be more than happy to answer as many questions as we have. I will stay on for the full hour. I don't want to take any more of your time. And of course, this whole webinar will be recorded, and we'll be pushing it up to our YouTube channels as well, so you can view it at a later time. So recent history, what do we got going on over here? So we're only starting back in June. We're not even going back farther than that. We go before June, we're going to have a Microsoft outage in there. Right, that happened in May, I believe, right? May, April, a huge Microsoft outage. We go back a couple months before that, we had a couple Amazon regional outages. Let's start talking in June. June 2nd is a huge Google outage, right? It was a long, bad outage. I think it started on a Sunday. I think I was in a Costco parking lot at the time, and my phone was blowing up with all these monitoring points. And we were moving all this traffic from for users from the Google cloud to other cloud providers when YouTube was down and everything like that at the same time. On June 25th, there was that big route leak, right? With the Verizon did the route leak. They had the one of their clients, they pushed up the bad route. It brought Cloudflare out regionally and worldwide for a lot of their customers. AWS was down as well, right, with that route leak. And July 2nd, let's just start talking about a little over a week ago. July 2nd, Cloudflare had that huge outage, right? And just so Google didn't feel like they were being left out of the news, they had another outage as well. And this shows you that it's not definitely just with these cloud providers. Look, Facebook was down July 3rd. On July 4th, Apple wanted to celebrate Independence Day by having a little bit of an outage as well. So all these providers are having outages. And what that really shows you, it doesn't matter how big you are, right? It doesn't matter how small you are. There's going to be outages in the cloud hosting platform, because the internet is not 100% run by one company, right? Sometimes these outages are caused by issues that the provider does. Cloudflare had, a bad regex, I believe, that was pushed through on their WAF devices that brought them down worldwide. But another outage they had before that was done by a route leak brought up by Verizon. So the internet's not a safe place. And we have a lot of time customers will go to us, say, okay, we're moving our DNS off. We're going to put it all on one solution, so it's all done in one place and it's completely safe. And it's never going to go down. And then 3 months later, they have an outage and they end up coming back and they're like, what can we do? How do we fix this? So this is what some of those things we were going to try to address today in the webinar, is figuring out, okay, it doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter how big anyone, it doesn't matter what salesperson is telling you whatever, or what dinner they take you out to, there's going to be an issue, right? And it really comes back to the Murphy's Law. If anything can go wrong, it will. And you have to expect that, and you want to get ready for that, and you want to be ready for that, right? That's part of being in the IT industry, is figuring out, okay, everything is down. How do I get my systems back up? How do I do this as fastly and quickly as possible? So what we have next is I want to talk to people a little bit about the clouds and everything like that. So what we want to ask everybody is, do you currently use more than one cloud or CDN provider? And what I want to ask here is, I want to try to base this in understanding of the people that are using multiple clouds. Are you, right? And then we're going to try to figure out a solution for you. And a lot of times people don't go to the multi-cloud for that reason. So we're going to talk about this a little bit. I talked about how all these providers are gone down and how these issues that people have had and all these outages. I'm sure everyone on this phone, on this webinar, has been affected by it or knows someone who has been affected. If not, then you really don't have any internet presence or have internet connection. So let's close out this poll real quickly. So let's see what we have here on the results. So 50% are not. Look, 45% are multi-cloud. And 5% have thought about it, right? So that's a pretty even break over here. So we're about a 50-50 are multi-cloud at this point, right? So that's actually a really good, interesting stat to know. So the only solution you really have in one cloud provider going down is a multi-redundant solution, right? It's a multi-redundancy, multiple cloud providers for every mission critical service. And that doesn't just mean DNS, that means DNS, content delivery, WAF, DDoS, you know, your computing engines, your database engines, you name it. And that is possible today, right? If you look at the cloud providers, everyone's different pricing and stuff like that, but they all offer similar characteristics and similar functionality. And so if you build your applications and if you develop your applications to deploy this and use the similar characteristics, you can actually save money, increase uptime, increase performance, and do everything you can do. And DNS can sort of power this and kind of architect this. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I think I have a next question that's going to line up, and I'm actually curious as well. Are you currently using more than one DNS provider? And the reason why I'm interested in this is to try to figure out the collaboration that's being done within the community and talking about what companies are using, what solutions, and how they're being worked all together. So let's let this one run for another second. I'm gonna close this one out as well. And they're still flying in, so we're just gonna shut this down real quickly. All right, so what do we got? So right now, based upon the attendees over here, so 40% are and 58% are not, all right? That's actually pretty common for our user base. Most of the users that have used us for 10, 11, 12 years have never had even a regional outage with our DNS solution. So we understand that, but we do work with multiple vendors for multiple solutions, and there's ways of doing that. And if you ever wanted to have that in your infrastructure, you can let our team know. Now, I will say that usually the pricing for our competing services that offer anything near us is going to be a little bit more. So DNS Made Easy Constellix is constantly the price leader in all of our services, and we always work hard to achieve that. But if you're looking at a multiple redundant solution, it's always we always recommend it. That's the best practice. That's the best in the industry practice, and we definitely offer that capabilities. So what I want to do now is kind of talk a little bit about what we're going to do with the multiple cloud redundant solutions, and we're going to talk about how we're going to manage the flow, how this traffic flows from one CDN provider to another CDN provider, right? And of course, we want to use your DNS provider to offer this to increase your solutions for speed and uptime, right? And all these other things that you can possibly do within your environment, right? And we are what we consider a DNS provider, right? We consider ourselves with the top in the industry. We've always been working on speed and uptime. In the last 6 years, we've been working on a lot of great features to offer individual ideas like this. So I'm going to take a quick stop over here and make sure I don't have any large outstanding questions, and I think I don't, so I'm going to keep going on. So the main 3 facts that we're going to talk about with a multi-cloud, multi-CDN solution at this time is uptime and ways you can use DNS to actually increase your uptime when you're a multi-CDN or a multi-cloud solution. Performance, right? How can you then start using monitoring systems and a monitoring company that also manages your traffic, such as Constellix, right? To actually manage multiple clouds and route traffic based upon which cloud provider is currently the fastest for you. And there's many different ways of doing that. And we'll just talk about them for a little bit. And then we're going to talk about some cool things that we're working on. This one I'm just going to hit on real quickly about some near future stuff we're working on with analytics, query anomaly detection, query anomalies, and that's some really great stuff we're working on inside of our R&D group here in our another sister company that we have that's associated with us. So the first part is uptime, right? Now with uptime, you're looking at, you have your hosted CDN and you're with a cloud provider Let's say it's Amazon and Amazon's currently down, right? But they're your CDN, right? You're using the CloudFront, and everything's down, and you got to move the traffic over somewhere else. And you know the solutions before used to be, well, no, if you're going to use a CDN provider, you got to use their DNS. You want to put everything, you want to put all your eggs in one basket, and you want to keep it all safe and secure, and so they won't go down. We're showing over and over again, and it's been the same for the past 17 years, and at least in the 20 years I've been in the industry, every provider has these downtimes. So you want to prevent these outages, right? And so the basic way that we have it is failover, right? And you can failover with round robin, you can do quad A name, C name. We had a good webinar last month or a little month ago that talked about the A name records and how that can be used inside CDNs. And so what we want to do is we want to monitor the performance of our CDNs, right? And just base it upon the up and down times of them, and then make decisions on those records. So you can see over here I have a couple of screenshots, one showing our sonar monitoring applications where we're actually monitoring a solution, and I'm actually going to bring this up in our demo and walk through the different configurations that you can do within inside of a DNS environment. And then I'm also going to, and then we're going to talk about the monitoring, and then we're going to talk about how you can actually put that into your DNS rules and say, okay, I now want to make decisions based upon which DNS providers up or down. You can keep a round robin, right? You can keep that traffic going between all of them, and then as one goes down, one's dropped. Or you can keep it so that when you have a primary one, if the primary one goes down, it goes to the secondary one, right? So that's sort of uptime, and that will fix generally, you know, 95% of people's problems, right? Because most people are using a CDN. One CDN provider generally is good enough for most people. It's fast enough. You know, they're going to have some slow and some headaches every so often, but overall, if that provider goes down, all you guys don't want to deal with those issues, right? You want to make it so that it's an easy solution. You can move off it. You know automatically your traffic's going to be going somewhere else. So the next time Amazon has an outage or Cloudflare has an outage or anything like that, you guys can rest well knowing your traffic's not going to be down more than for a couple minutes, right? And that's kind of where the Constellar's basic DNS failover services were designed, was to fix those sort of issues, right? And then from there, it starts going more now. So now that once you start having multiple clouds, right, and you start having these other issues, what can you do to actually increase this performance, right? And what can you do to actually say, okay, I now have cloud provider A and cloud provider B and cloud provider C. Why don't I just use the fastest one overall? Why don't I use the fastest one in a particular region? Or why don't I use the fastest one based upon what my users are telling me based upon their end user data, right? And so we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that in our interfaces. And these are kind of two of the screen captures I showed you here. You can see the one on the left, we actually have, you see 3 different cloud providers. I see Amazon, I see Key CDN, and I believe the top one looks to be a StackPath FQDN. And you can tell how StackPath is having a faster response time in this region, so why not direct the traffic to the fastest one, right? If you have all 3, you're only paying on usage, doesn't really cost any more, it's only paying on usage, so why not send the traffic to the fastest one? On the solution to the right, it shows you a little bit about some of our internal RUM, ITO. RUM stands for Real User Monitoring, and ITO is our Internet Traffic Optimization. So here now we're basing the decisions based upon the real user measurements and real user monitoring of your end users. So how this is done is you can put BGP, you can put JavaScript inside of your web pages. We automatically will be monitoring this stuff all the time based upon our synthetic checks, as you see on the left. But at the same point now, we're going to figure out which network from what region is going to be faster for all individual users. So this is where I tell people, you know, if you're on a Sprint cell phone in a state or in a particular region, and if that's faster to go to this CDN provider than it is to go over Verizon cell phone, why wouldn't you use one provider over the other? Why are you directing someone that's faster on Sprint to go to a slower network, right? You send them to the most fastest network you can based upon all the measurements that you have. And then you can take all these measurements that are provided to you, and you can hold your CDN companies accountable, right? Some of these CDN companies that a lot of the IT shops actually have contracts for, you have these huge SLAs, but they also have performance guarantees. And if you have the true factual data and say, hey, here's the true factual data, users in this region from this network were having issues in latency. You know, you guys have to, you could usually what we found is that when we provide that data to our users, they're actually getting that savings back. You're actually saving money on that. You're holding your CDN providers accountable. And you're actually saving money once you have all the data that you need, just by holding certain companies accountable. So what I want to do real quickly is I have the next poll out, and the next poll is going to talk about if you have or have not moved, and we're going to talk a little bit about how this is done inside the Constellar platform, or how it could be done, and we're going to talk about the difficulties of doing some of these solutions. But if you have moved, then what were the big limitations you did in setting up a multi-cloud infrastructure? And if you have not, what are some of the big difficulties you had? You know, did you think it was impossible? Do you think it was too difficult? Do you think it was too expensive? Or do you think it was expensive and difficult, right? And that's really what I want to try to figure out over here. Because understanding this will kind of understand, and we can, all these can be demiffed, right? It's definitely not impossible. I think everybody knows that. I don't see many responses in that. Can it be too difficult? It could be, but you're architecting a solution for the cloud anyway, right? I know I have a lot of friends that work in the business as well, and they work for IT companies, and they fully rebuilt their whole entire development to work with one cloud provider, right? And I'm scratching my bald head trying to figure out, like, why would you do that? Why would you rebuild everything just to work with one cloud provider when you could build it to make it more general for both cloud providers? And so let's just take a look at the poll over here and try to figure this out. Okay, so let me see. I'm gonna share these results. I don't like hiding anything. So, okay, no one thought it was impossible. That's good. Hopefully the first, how long have we been talking so far? The first 20 minutes have indicated it's not impossible. You kind of tell a whole understanding of why we're even talking about this. And it's obviously not too difficult. It's not impossible. We know that. So is it too difficult? It could be, right? So a lot of ideas of talking about multi-cloud comes about, okay, which part of you putting into the cloud, right? Probably the more simpler ones is CDN, right? So CDN, I'm gonna show you how you can set it up in about 4 or 5 minutes, right inside Constellar. Now, the too expensive myth, that's actually kind of interesting. So most cloud providers, right, unless you're, one of the most expensive ones, of course, is Amazon, as everyone knows. But if you talk about the cloud providers, right, you're only paying based on usage, right? And so if you said, okay, I'm gonna split my usage across 2 different cloud providers, generally your in and outs are gonna be split in half. You're not really increasing your cost that much, right? It's kind of a myth where you go multiple cloud, you're gonna be increasing your costs, especially if you have a lot of bandwidth going in and out of different solutions, right? So expensive and difficult, you can kind of say, okay, that's putting it all into one, right? It's gonna take too much work and it's gonna be too expensive. I hope I could try to convince you guys that it's not too expensive to go multi-cloud. And the research shows, and if you look at it, talked to a lot of our clients that have used us, and I've talked to a lot of them as they've implemented it, they've actually lowered their costs, right? And so a good example would be that one company would say, okay, you know what, I'm going to choose different companies regionally based upon their performance. And I'm going to say, okay, I know I have this really great CDN that's based in the Asia Pacific region, right, which I know has really great connectivity to the eyeball networks in that region. That's going to help out, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, Hong Kong, going in parts of China, and I have another provider just for China. Well, you could turn up these different CDNs, right, for everyone you want, and then you can let another service such as Constellar make the decisions to actually route traffic to the fastest provider. And then at the same point, you can have your global providers everywhere else in Europe, North America. You can use, the Google Cloud services, the Microsoft Azure services, the Amazon services. You can use Cloudflare. You can put them all everywhere else. and knowing that they're not as strong in those particular regions, and you can get a really fast, that's region specific, like a good Chinese CDN is going to outperform anyone that's global, and you can actually achieve those goals. So when you're doing that, you're generally also getting a better price point too, right? Because you're going to choose someone that specializes in a certain market. You're only paying based on usage, and you can actually determine that by choosing a more specific, a service in a particular region, you're going to get a better price point. So for instance, there's several CDNs out there that only specialize in a certain market, and to compete, they know they have to offer a lower price point than the big global providers. So they have a better performance in that region than a global provider would, but they're not going to have the same global performance, but you only use them where they're actually benefiting you. And we actually have some features inside of Constellix as well, which are called, you could do pricing handicaps or performance handicaps, where you can actually determine to say, I only want to use a certain provider if they're so much better performing, because they could be a more expensive provider at the same point. And you can say, okay, this provider is a lot cheaper, I prefer to use them unless it's significantly slower than the next guy. So we have those options as well. And then what we're going to talk about a little bit more near the end of our a little bit over here is what we're showing in the future. We're actually going to have future analytics and stuff like that. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So what I want to do right now, though, is let me pop out my screen, and I'm going to bring up my Constellix dashboard here. And let me see. Let me log in. I think you guys are all seeing my wonderful desktop at this moment. So let me bring this over. All right, so you can see this is the Constellix DNS dashboard. What I want to do actually at the same point is bring up our sonar monitoring dashboard, and we can actually look at the different the metrics that we have in the system. So within Constellix, obviously we have our monitoring application, which monitors the performance of all your systems. You can monitor regionally, you can monitor worldwide. I'm going to show you how this is set up within our system. So if you go right now within our multi-CDN system, it will automatically set up a bunch of regional checks for you. So if we look at this, this is an Amazon CloudFront one over here. And if you look at where it's doing its monitoring from, it's going to monitor all from within one region. So reason why we want to do this is because we want to make our failover decisions regionally. Right? If one CDN provider has a regional issue, what we can do is that we can automatically say they're down in this region, they're not down worldwide, right? And that's a big difference between the Constellix product and a lot of other products that are out there, is that a lot of other products are going to make a worldwide decision. Hey, they're down in Europe, let's take them offline everywhere. Where generally that's not what's going to happen to a lot of the CDN outages. If you look at most of our failovers, they're done regionally, they're not done worldwide. Obviously, Cloudflare had the worldwide one last week, but a lot of Amazon outages are regional. A lot of other providers have regional outages and things like that. So we do a lot of this setup for you automatically. When you use some of our tools, you obviously can go through and you can set them up yourself as well. But we actually are, we're going to make the connection, and we have a CDN set up over here called camp.server.us. But what this is doing is measuring our performance, and it's going to do a lot of our decisions. Let's go back to that one again. It doesn't really matter which one it is, actually. I just want to make sure I have one that has some sort of valid data. And I keep clicking on the same thing. So as Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So what we also do, though, is that we're gathering the metrics from our different POPs. So you can see we have a bunch of POPs over here. And just like a CDN should be, we should see really, really good speeds. You can tell we had a bad anomaly, right? In Paris, we had a really high speed, which kind of blew everything out. It had a 5-second response for a few checks. But then overall, the CDN's getting really good fast response times. We're also gathering all the data. You can look at the response times, 2 milliseconds, 29 seconds for the DNS lookup. Because we do have, when you do use a CDN, you are making that additional lookup of the CDN provider at the same time. So we do give you all those analytics. And so then we are constantly, the biggest thing though, is to checking if it's up and down. So if you were doing your configuration, let's go into a domain I've just set up more recently. And if I want to do basic failover, I'd go to failover and I put in the one host name for my one CDN, I put in the other host name for my other CDN, and then I put in the relevant sonar check that I want to make the decisions based on. And so as soon as one of the CDN providers goes down, it's automatically detected and it fails over to the next one, right? So that's just a basic CNAME failover. This of course can be done as well in A-name records, where you can provide this sort of functionality, and you don't actually provide this, and you would need this if it's being done at the root record, of course. And we talked about why you need the A-name records in our last webinar that is found online. So that's just basic CNAME, basic CDN cloud provider failover. It's very easy to set up and it's very cost effective, right? So you can do monitoring every 30 seconds, I believe, for I forget, I think the number, it's about $1.50, $1.60 every single month inside Sonar, where we're doing all these metrics for you. We're constantly gathering once every 30 seconds, we're getting all this data, and then you can make the decisions based on that. You can make the decisions based on that in your CNAME failover. I'm just going to clean out my screens a little bit so you don't I keep clicking on the wrong ones. So that's a very simple, easy to do setup. It's very simple, and the reason why it's utterly 4 seconds of configuration, right? It's not that hard at all. So hopefully we're removing the idea that it's too difficult, right? I know 21% that said it was too difficult. And doing multi-CDN, we talked about, it should not be too expensive. So hopefully we defunct a bunch of those myths already. And so the next thing we're talking about is performance. So now that I had these multiple CDNs, how can we now just make the decisions based upon the best performing CDN? And so what we do inside Constellar is we create what's called pools. And inside pools, let's open a couple of them up over here. You can tell I have a bunch set up in this test account. So what we do in pools is that we make the decisions. You can tell I killed this CDN on the backside, or I killed the monitoring for it. But what we do is that we actually have different speeds and a different metric. So you can tell here we have stack path, we have CloudFront, and we have key CDN, right? This is Amazon CloudFront, and this is the North America West. So if I go to my monitoring, and if I was to look at my North America West metrics, I forgot which one I'm in. I'm in the run. So if I go to run, North America West, CDN 77, here you go. So these are the metrics that you're seeing are being brought into, this one's actually, I gotta load up a different account. CloudFront. There it is. So these are the different metrics that are being populated going into here. So we take all your regional checks. We're looking in the monitoring region of just the North America West, and every 30 seconds, we're going to then make the decision of using the solution, whichever is faster for you, right? So we're automatically going to make that decision, route the traffic to the fastest location, and automatically make that decision. Now, all these monitoring points are being done within our monitoring nodes, right? And these are all within like these multi-homed, really redundant data facilities. So it's really not giving you, it's giving you a good access of if a CDN provider starts having larger issues, right? But it's not giving you that end mile, that last mile diagnostics and testing that you may want. And so for that, we offer a feature called RUM, right? It's the real user monitoring. And so let me just set up this over here. I was setting up a few up a little bit earlier. And what we developed is we give you a JavaScript, right? And you choose the providers that you want. And then we give you a JavaScript, which actually you'll put inside your page. And now you could use, we could use this, or if you wanted to, you can just use our other existing clients' data as well. So we're constantly gathering data and analytics from a lot of hundreds of other websites right now. actually thousands of other websites, but hundreds of different clients are using this already. And so we're gathering what we call community data for several providers. So you can just make the decisions based upon the community data if you don't even want to make the decisions based upon your other data. So you just got to use, you can tell I was testing, setting up a custom CDN here as we start adding more community data. But what all these will do is that once you add this JavaScript, we're going to start pre-populating what we call these IP filters, right? And in these IP filters, what we're going to do is that we're going to constantly figure out from what networks are the fastest. So if I look over here for, this is CDN 77 on the East Coast of the United States, these are going to go into all the name servers on the East Coast of the United States. So you notice you're not going to see stuff here for Asia Pacific or Europe because these rules wouldn't apply to those name servers. You'd have to go to the Europe one for that, and you would say, okay, this is where it's faster. So CDN 77 is actually faster in Turkey, India, and United Kingdom, but then in Ukraine, only this one AS is going to be faster. So we kind of keep the rules as simple as possible. We're not going to have a lot of redundant rules. So because, just so for instance, in CDN, which one we have over here? CDN static, this is, I think stack path. Yeah, this is stack path. So stack path is faster in North Carolina for most networks. So we're not going to list all the different networks here that North Carolina is going to be faster. But if I go to the other providers for this configuration, you're going to see that they're going to have some ASNs for North Carolina, right? Because this is the default. Since this has the most number of networks in North Carolina, it automatically gets North Carolina. And then if another network is faster just for that one particular network, that one CDN provider would have it. So let's say StackPath is faster for the most number of networks in North Carolina, but Amazon is faster for 4 or 5. So Amazon may list the 4 or 5 different ASNs on that network. So we can say here in this rule, we got North Carolina, Kansas, New Jersey, but then you see we have the more specific rules where we're going to say, okay, within, you can tell here, see, within New York, you have AS 326, 36265. We also have AS 33355, 21928. You're going to see where you have multiple rules where StackPath is going to be faster. And so, and since these measurements are updated every minute, we know within the last minute, these end users are getting better performance by using this one cloud provider, this one CDN provider over another one. And that is the best way of getting the measurements for your end users and giving the best end results for your users, right? You're doing this decision based upon your end user's experience, which is really the most important part. And you can see, so what we do is we populate all these rules for you, we generate all these rules, and then inside your configurations, let's open one up where I have this set up inside of my server.us. Inside of your configurations, inside, let's look up at US East over here, and let me increase my screens here. You can say that you know, inside, I want to use Amazon CloudFront, and it's only going to be affected by the people that are running the Amazon CloudFront North America East IP filter, right? And wherever that stack path is available, I want to go there. And wherever CDN 77 is available, I want to go there. Wherever key CDN's fastest, I want to use there. So we create these individual rules for you, and we apply it to that particular region, and we put it on those particular name servers, right? And so this automatically is making the decision of your users, routing them to the fastest possible cloud provider based upon the real user metrics that they're doing. And a good thing about our services as well, and what we allow you to do, is you can actually do overrides, right? So if you look down, if you noticed in those IP filters, let's bring one up over here. You can do any user rules in here. So you can say, okay, I want to do this IP network, or no matter what, this IP network, I always want to use this cloud provider. And this way you can do your own testing and your own performance metrics and stuff like that. So that gives you a good solution. So I hope that kind of shows you what the power you can do with a multi-cloud solution and a multi-provider CDN to move around that. And this time we were talking a lot about the measurements we can do. We're also going to start doing, you know, monitoring of your database applications, right? So within every single Constellar Sonar application, you could determine what are the actual IPs monitoring you. You could open up particular IPs, and then we can monitor your database applications at the same point, right? And say, okay, this database instance is down. We want to fail over to the other cloud provider, right? All this can be built in inside your infrastructure for relatively similar cost. You are going to be paying for the size of the memory and stuff like that, but you're in and out are going to be balanced out. We're actually not going to be paying too much more, in particular in that instance. With CDN providers, like we were saying, like I've mentioned, you usually are saving money when you start going multi-cloud for some of the computing engines and inside stuff. Sometimes you're going to be paying a little bit more, but you're going to be getting overall much higher uptime in the performance for you. So one thing that we are working on that I did mention, I got to find where my keynote went over here, is we're doing a lot of things in our R&D labs now talking about query anomalies, right? So we're looking at your queries, we're determining when they're going out of scope, when they're going within scope. As you can see over here, we have algorithms that are tracing your queries in real time. That are going to be determining if you're going above a certain query threshold that you normally do, based upon that time of day, based upon business hours, based upon holiday, based upon all that stuff, and then what sort of decisions can we make on that, right? We're also using we're going to be doing algorithms to say, look at your trace routes. Look at BGP tables and look at the SNMP charts on your servers and start making more proactive decisions for you. So if we looked at those outages, right, you would see the BGP route leak happen well before performance went down, right? You saw the BGP route being pushed out, you saw the trace route getting messed up, then you saw the performance of your website go to poop, right? So what we could have done is make those decisions beforehand, right? And those are things we're working in R&D labs right now, where we're looking at all this data and saying, hey, hindsight 2020, it's very easy to detect an outage. But now let's say, okay, let's look at the neural net technologies, look at all these other proactive analytics and predictive analytics that we actually can say, we have a 95% chance that your site's going to be going under DDoS attack. There's an 80% chance that your site's going to be slowing down. We think you should move DNS services. We think you should move to this provider that's not going to have that, right? Use all of those metrics that we're gathering and make decisions based upon that. And that's kind of like really the next evolution is now. The idea of multi-cloud, at least for us, the idea of multi-cloud and doing multi-cloud stuff based upon the performance, we've done that, right? We've had that sort of figured out for well over a year now, and more users are signing up every single time. But really where the world's evolving to is how can we use all this other predictive analytics and actually make decisions now so that our users never experience an outage. Like, we don't want them to get slow or have an out, then change. How do we make a change before the outage even happens? And that's sort of the R&D that we're actually working with here. We're working with several universities, doing some joint R&D projects with them, some really exciting stuff. If you are a local company, if you attend any of our local technical talks that we put on here in Northern Virginia, we've talked about them before as well, and we're always interested to always talk about them. If you ever want to know more about those, just feel free to reach out to us. So that's everything that we have going on here at Constellix. I do want to open it up for questions now. If you do have any sort of issues at all, please let me know. I'm going to start going through some of these contents here. Okay, so I have a couple. I'm trying to group a few of these together. I got one based upon dynamic content. I got another one based upon the static content. Okay, another one on, okay, so overall, there's a concern that if your site is using dynamic content, is that you can't use a multi-cloud solution. And that's actually, that's not true, because I do know how our Constellix product was designed and how we developed it. So look at the different solutions that are out there, right? Look at the, if you're talking about Redis cluster, you're talking about database replication, you're looking at Cassandra, you're looking at all the different solutions that are out there. Where is your database, right? It always starts at the ground point, right? It's like, okay, where is your data being stored, and what are the possible ways where you can replicate that data, right? And that it always starts at that level, right? Even though your content is being drawn from these dynamic sources, right? Where is your dynamic source being stored right now? And then the next approach will be, how do I move that from a single storage on one cloud provider to be on multiple cloud providers, right? Working across. Now, the one thing I want to tell you to do is, when you architect any solution, is stay away from the specific only available at this one cloud provider, some hocus pocus behind the scene thing that they're doing, some hack they're putting in there that's going to lock you to using that one solution, right? You never want to go over to a company where you're locked in and they're the only solution for you, because you're kind of locking into them. You don't want to re-architect everything. I talked to numerous companies that kind of go all in. They say, I got to re-architect it to work within Amazon. I'm like, well, congratulations. Now you're going to be working for Amazon for the rest of your life, right? You want to rebuild any sort of application that's pulling from a dynamic source to use something that can be easily moving from one provider to another provider, right? That is not that if you have any sort of, if you're doing development, there's a lot of services out there that already will replicate data on multiple sources. You want to just look into a solution like that that's actually going to do a multi-master approach. Most systems out there, the high volume, the high data services out there already have that embedded. And so once you start doing that, you're not going to start locking into one provider. You're not going to say, okay, I'm going to put everything in, my Amazon East Coast. You're going to do Amazon and Google, right? Or Amazon and Microsoft, right? Start using both of the providers, right? And just get that started, or that data replicated, right? That's the first step. Your next step is to say, okay, how do I take the websites now and start pulling from whichever solution is the fastest, right? And what we usually do when companies are at that level, we make custom FQDNs, right? We make custom fully qualified domain names that are going to point to whichever of those database sources which is the fastest for them, right? Based upon the actual monitoring from their server, right? Because their server is the one that needs to gather this data and grab it. So they can actually give us measurements, and then they can say, okay, right now, I have this web server hosted here. I'm pulling my dynamic sources from Microsoft and from Amazon. It's faster to go from Microsoft. It usually is. Technically, Microsoft usually tends to outperform, and so we're going to prefer Microsoft until they have an outage. Then we're going to switch over to Amazon. So I'm looking at a lot of the tickets here. A lot of people are saying that it doesn't apply. Multi-cloud does apply even if you have dynamic content. That is something that can easily be arranged. So is it possible your failover serviced? We got SIP ports automatically, and then I got a couple more on the type of monitoring. So by default, Constellar has several different monitoring ports. We do HTTP, HTTPS, and you can pick particular ports. We have a basic TCP check, which you can pick any port you want, and then we have a DNS check. If you need something else, let us know, right? Let us know if you need, like for instance, a lot of the UDP ports, a lot of UDP services are a particular protocol. Let us know. We can easily add, we have a couple we're working on already for some of the larger VoIP providers to do some monitoring. So let us know if it's in the works and stuff like that, and we can build it in there, right? So, and last question is, if anyone would please let me know, I'm actually curious over here, what are your current primary cloud providers you use, right? And this is the largest that I've seen in the industry. I just want to know, based upon the people on the phone call today, what are most people using? I know which ones that we see in our system. I just know there's a lot of users on the webinar today. There's several hundred actually that aren't even clients of ours. That just wanted to know more information about this and to figure out what providers everyone's using. And it's actually good to know in the industry what people are kind of moving to or moving away from and stuff like that. I know originally Amazon was huge. We saw a lot of users going to Amazon, but just based on cost and stuff like that, more and more companies have been pulling back and moving to others. And so I just want to do a quick little poll here. All right, I'm going to shut this one down here. Let me share the results. So based upon everyone that's attending today, look at that. Microsoft has actually been the primary provider. 53% are other, and Google Cloud's only at 7%. Inside our FQDNs, we see a lot of people using StackPath. That's why I put them in there, but obviously that's not going to warrant all the other cloud providers combined. Oracle has less than 1% in the FQDNs that we have in our system. Overall, still Amazon's our largest inside of our systems, if I had to do the statistics on it, but Microsoft's been the fastest growing on us just because of price and performance as of recently. So this poll sort of symbolizes what's kind of been going on in the current growth of new users onto our platforms, which sort of makes sense going forward. So, all right, so that's really everything I have for today. I think there's a couple other random questions here, but are just more user specific. So I'm going to make sure that my team here reaches out to everybody after the webinar to answer any of those questions. Once again, thank you all for attending this webinar. If you have anything else, feel free to let us know. Once again, this is Stephen Job from DNS Made Easy Constellar. You all have a wonderful day.